Hey. Welcome, everybody. I'm Michael Gaster. I am a local volunteer with the Savannah Libertarians and been volunteering for this campaign, helping put together this event, as well as... thank you. And on the topic of volunteering, even though we're less than a week away from the election day, it's not too late to volunteer. You can get some materials. You can go to your neighbors. This Friday, we're doing a sign wave. You can join us. You can do your own sign wave. That's the great thing. This is a very organic campaign and idea. So it's never too late to volunteer and to get involved with the party. One thing that I found in volunteering and being part of this campaign and going canvassing was there are really a lot of nice Biden supporters and Trump supporters. The thing is you have to have a discussion with them. You have to talk with people. And that's how the message of liberty spreads. It's just talking with people. And one thing great about the discussion tonight is having this great venue. So thank you, John Henderson, Coach's Corner, for providing a venue for this discussion tonight. So, driving this discussion, we have one of the best, in fact, recently named, once again, not just the best conservative Savannian, but also the host of the best morning show, my friend, Bill Edwards.
We press this button? Oh, there we go. I love modern technology.
And
Bill, pleasure.
This is awesome. This is truly awesome. But now, the lady of the hour. She was the 1996 vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. She's an entrepreneur, a senior lecturer at Clemson University. She has traveled all over this nation, has met almost as many people as Joe Biden has locked up under the 94 crime bill. She is your next president of the United States, Dr. Jo Jorgensen.
Come on up here, Doctor. Bravo. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And Dr. Jorgensen, thank you so much for taking some time to be here. As Joe Biden would say, it's nice to be back in Nevada. In fact, when you get off the plane, whether it's Lost Wages or Reno, the first thing they will say to you when you walk in is that it's Nevada. It's not Nevada. Don't get that wrong. Kind of like Kamala, you know what I mean? So it's a pleasure to have you here. You know, tiny oaks, or mighty oaks from tiny acorns grow. And you start chipping away, and pretty soon you can break that dam. The Libertarian Party is one of those, is the party that believes that the government shouldn't do anything for you that you can do for yourself more than anything else. And I think that's one of the discussions that we're going to have tonight. Dr. Jorgensen, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
So good to be here.
In fact, I think this was meant to be. I think we discussed this before. You were someplace called Libertyville.
That's where I was born.
Libertyville, Illinois. Now pinpoint that geographically for us.
About 40 miles north of Chicago.
Okay. So what interested you? Did you get interested in politics at an early age or what?
I'm still not interested in politics. I view voting libertarian as an act of self-defense. I read Animal Farm in grade school and then got to high school and thought it was outrageous that an elite few, like student council, got to make decisions for everybody else. I thought, well, how is this fair? And then I learned about the Libertarian Party right before graduating from college. And I thought, wow, somebody out there actually believes what I believe in, that people should make their own decisions. What a concept.
When did it come to you that perhaps you should get into the political arena?
In '92, I ran for U.S. House in South Carolina, 4th Congressional District. I wanted to get the word out there. And I actually had a lot of fun. Have you ever heard of Bob Inglis? He was He was Liz Patterson's challenger, and his slogan was, reclaim Congress. And so every time he got up and was like, reclaim Congress, I would get up there and I would say, reclaim America from Congress. And he kept doing it, I kept doing it.
Well, good for you, because Congress has certainly claimed us. If you don't think so, take a look sometimes. There is an ad that is running now against Ms. Mace over in South Carolina that is talking about how she wants to tax you another 23%.
Have always treated me very well. Even back in 1992, the local NBC affiliate allowed me to be on the stage with Liz Patterson and Bob Inglis for the televised debate. And luck of the draw, I happened to get the lectern that was right in the middle. So I had the Democrat and Republican on either side of me. And just like Trump and Biden, they were after each other all night. And the Greenville News the next day in the newspaper write-up called me a rose between two thorns after the two of them battling it out. So that was pretty good.
Now, we talk about this being one of the greatest country in the world. Originally when the immigrants came in here, especially during the late 1800s, early 1900s, they came here to be Americans. There was no minimum wage, there was no welfare system, there was no safety net of any sort. There was no, they could take any job they could find and get any place they could find. And when they sent their kids to school, the school started teaching them in English. And you came from Danish heritage. Didn't your grandparents come here from Denmark?
Yeah, two of my grandparents are from Denmark and one is from Sweden.
And came here legally?
Yes, before the border shut down in the 1920s.
What do you think what kind of insight do you think that gives you? Because having talked to them when you were growing up, I'm sure you got some great stories from the motherland.
Oh yeah, in fact, I open up my stump speech talking about my grandmother from Denmark, who told me, she's the one who gave me the love I have of my country, explaining how great America is, and you can work any job you want, you can start your own company. And in the old country, it didn't matter if you held 2 or 3 jobs. The government took everything away so everybody could be the same. And then I lead into, that's why I'm running for president, because we're headed back towards Denmark. And also I've pointed out a few times, on the other side of my family, my grandfather's family came here for freedom. And yet how ironic that Sweden didn't lock up all their citizens during the pandemic.
Yeah.
The restaurant, shopping, education, they're all open. Meanwhile, land of the free, home of the brave that my ancestors came here for, we're all under house arrest. So that's rather ironic.
And isn't it interesting that no matter what we seem to do, it just keeps spreading, so let's just get our lives back. It's nice to see people out here, most of you without your masks, enjoying the fresh air, and that's what they tell you you're supposed to do anyway, is get out here and get fresh air.
Yeah. Oh, and let me back up to my grandparents. One
Please.
other thing too, because I don't want to drag the story on too much when I go through my stump speech talking about my grandmother, but one thing I don't mention is, you and I sit here talking about how you can start any company you want, you can work 2 or 3 jobs, I wonder if people maybe have visions that my grandparents lived behind a gated community or something. Actually, they retired to a small town in Florida, and they lived in a trailer. And actually, she would always correct me. She would say mobile home, but they retired to a mobile home park. And so it wasn't like, oh, we had to come here to make gobs of money. It was the freedom that they could start their own company and run it how they wanted to, and have the economic freedoms that we used to have. In fact, it wasn't that long ago. In fact, if you don't mind my going down my own path here.
Please.
When I first became a libertarian, and people asked me, what's a libertarian? Because back then nobody knew. I would say, it's the best of both worlds. We take the economic freedoms from the right and the fact that you can own guns. And then we take the social freedoms from the left. Now you can't even say that anymore. Republicans no longer have economic freedoms, and the left certainly doesn't have any kind of social freedoms. In fact, they're the most anti-free speech people out there at the moment.
That is, it is disturbing just how bad it is. They're trying to close us down here in evil conservative talk radio. And I know that Tucker Carlson last night had just one of the
Yes.
blockbuster interview with a gentleman named Tony
Bobulinski.
Bobulinski. and a retired Navy officer, and said he had to come out and say something about the Bidens because they were accusing him of treason and trying to shut him up. They've been, Black Lives Matter and others have been trying to get Tucker Carlson off of television, and he has been very heroic in getting this out, but the lamestream media has totally ignored this, and they can't say anything anymore because they're so in the tank for the Democrats that what's the purpose of coming out now and say, okay, well, we were kidding, you know, we really are.
Yeah, and notice how we haven't had any denials from the Democrats. Neither Joe Biden nor Hunter Biden, as far as I've heard, have said, no, those are lies, those are smears. They
it's
planted
Russian
that.
collusion.
Yeah, which I think is amusing, yeah. So this guy decided to open up, the Russians planted this little computer shop 20 years ago in the hopes that 20 years later, Hunter Biden.
This is the guy, this is the sleeping cell, the Manchurian candidate, here he is.
There you go, yeah.
Tell us about the freedom that some people don't understand what we have, because you have immigrant grandparents. And you said they came here. I've always said that a lot of our people here need to have a little dose of reality of going over somewhere else for a little while and finding out. Gator Rivers, who, by the Savannah Globetrotter, retired Globetrotter, who is running for office now as a Republican. I talked to him. I did television sports here for about 30 years. And he came back from one of those world tours that the Globetrotters did. He said when they got off the plane, they kissed the ground.
I believe it.
Of what a great country this is when you see what it's like elsewhere. And a lot of our young people, especially today, need a dose of reality. Present company accepted.
Yes. Well, actually, I haven't traveled the world too much. I'm somewhat of a homebody. But I do have an interesting story that's kind of the opposite direction. I went to Portugal last year. It's my first time ever going to Europe, which I know I waited way too late to do that. And I didn't even know until 2 or 3 months after I had come home that Portugal had decriminalized drugs years ago. I was like, really? I didn't notice anything. You know, I didn't see heroin addicts lying in the streets. So
that doesn't happen here,
that was very interesting. Yeah, right. We've got them here because it is illegal and they don't have them there.
A good way to dovetail into your stance on drug laws and things of that nature and incarceration.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Should I jump into it?
Please do.
And you've probably all heard this, but well, first of all, I know as a psychologist, it's much better to ask questions than to preach to people because it gets them thinking the answer to the question, and besides, nobody likes being preached to. And so I ask people, when's the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to sell gin, trying to push gin onto high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses to support a vodka habit? And when's the last time you heard of 2 liquor store owners having a shootout over the best corner? That these are not drug problems, they're drug prohibition problems. And by the way, they're the same problems we had in the 1920s with Al Capone, near where I grew up. Al Capone, the shootouts, the drive-by shootings, innocent people getting shot. Now we're like that all over again. And I was on a podcast where the guy said, well, okay, I'm with you on the marijuana, but not this meth stuff, because I don't want to have a meth house next to me because it's dangerous, the toxins, the children, you can buy a meth house and it's got toxins. And I think I might have actually scratched my head because, my next question was, when was the last time you ever heard of somebody making bathtub gin? I mean, that's why you want meth legalized, is so that it's Seagram's and Philip Morris making the meth, not the guy living next to you. Like, that makes absolutely no sense. You can clap for me.
Feel free to applaud, yeah.
It helps to be a teacher. I have to have fast answers for the students.
Well, and you have got a great educational background. You got a BA from Baylor. You got a master's from
actually BS.
BS
I worked
Baylor.
hard for that BS. I took physics and calculus and linear algebra.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got a master's from SMU, and then you got a PhD about 18 years ago from Clemson.
Yep, and I've earned another degree. I've actually earned another degree and a graduate certificate since then, but I don't put it on my resume. So I figure that's enough.
Well, do you think that, as going back to our education system, what do we need to be doing right now? Because all I can see is that they're teaching that the kids don't know. I've got granddaughters who are on the honor roll in some of our schools here, and you ask them questions about American history and their eyes glaze over.
Yeah, and it's really sad. I'm old school. I teach old school. I don't just flip through PowerPoints. I try not to be Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Again, my beloved hometown.
Bueller.
Yes.
Bueller.
Which, by the way, supposedly Ben Stein owns a house where I live in Greenville, South Carolina.
He is quite the entrepreneur and
yeah.
investor. He's been on Fox on numerous occasions on those Saturday morning shows talking about investing and stuff. Quite a sharp investor.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, an economist to start with. So I don't sit there at the PowerPoints, next. I write on the board, and I have students come up to me after their first test, and they're just befuddled. Like, they're used to high school is just basically, okay, here's photocopies of the PowerPoints, memorize these. Not really the critical thinking, and it's like, how are our high schools preparing students? And they talk about free college, which of course I'm against for a handful of reasons. First of all, it's not free, but it's like, I can see why people are demanding that, because now you need a college degree just to be where you used to be in high school.
Well, and of course there are a lot of people that don't need to go to college. We put this burden on these kids that they have to go to college. We still need people to repair our cars. We still need people to fix the plumbing. And I'm gonna kind of give you a thumbnail sketch of this quote from Mr. I.E. DuPont, who said, "Any society that lauds philosophers, because philosophy is a high degree of education, and degrades plumbers because that seems to be a low type grade thing, will have neither good philosophy nor good plumbing, that neither its philosophies or its pipes will hold water." So
that's very good.
Yeah, so that's degrading the things that we need. You're in a great, I want to thank our good buddy John Henderson and all once again for helping us out here at Coach's Corner. But thank the cooks. Somebody has to cook the food. Somebody cleans the table. Somebody gets it, sanitizes the place. It's very important. I remember one of the greatest speeches I ever heard was a fellow called Selling America by Rich DeVos, co-founder of the Amway Corporation. He said he went out one morning to meet the garbage man because he wanted to meet him. He walked up to him. It was about 5:30 in the morning. He says, "Hi, I came out here to meet you. Just wanted to tell you I appreciate your coming." So the guy looked at him and said, "You just getting up or you just coming in?" Said he wasn't sure. He says, "No, I just want to come out here and thank you. Tell you, do you know how important your job is? What it does for the health and welfare of all the people? How it protects us?" And the guy says, "I've been picking up garbage for years, man. Nobody ever told me that." And he said, "I say to you, isn't it a shame that a fellow American who's doing what he's able to do has had nobody tell him how important his work is?" And that's right at the grassroots. That's what the libertarians are all about. You do for yourself. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have other people helping you. There's a team effort and things like that, Dr. Jorgensen. But one of the most important things is get the government out of the way. It should be a helper, and the little bit that President Trump has done to at least cut some of the corporate taxes. Look how fast. Remember that the Dalai Lama told him, "What's he going to do? Wave a magic wand?" Okay. Well, the magic wand was the free enterprise system. You cut you cut all this regulation, you cut taxes, and the jobs came back in droves.
Yeah, and I haven't been Orange Man bad, going around talking about him. I haven't been bashing Trump. I've been pointing out some things that, where he made mistakes, of course.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But when people have asked me about the tax plan, I have said, well, he's headed in the right direction. Now, of course, the problem is he increased spending even more. Mm-hmm. So that's basically, as Milton Friedman would say, future taxes. He just increased taxation in the future by increasing spending without the taxes, but...
How do you feel about us printing all this money we don't have?
Oh my gosh, it's unconscionable.
And if I was looking at my phone a while ago, if I donated to everybody that's sent me texts on, please help this candidate, I'd need the $3 trillion stimulus package.
Yes. It's ridiculous.
It is. What do you think when you hear that people need more money, the government should give them more help, the government should pay for everything, socialized medicine, that sort of thing?
Well, I go back to something that I had mentioned when I was running for VP, and that is in the early 90s, United Way. The United Way president had spent something like had bought $400,000 worth of artwork, which, by the way, would be close to $1 million now. And what happened was the donations dried up. And people said, we're not gonna, we gave you that money to help unwed mothers or people with substance abuse or people who are out of a job, not fancy artwork. And so they had to work hard to prove they deserved it, that they would get the money to where it belongs. Now, if that same money goes to the federal government, there's no accountability. In fact, I'm sure you heard the stories. I gotta go look up this number. It was the UN ambassadors' drapes. They were like 50,000, 80,000, something like that.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to, because there was a big brouhaha over whether it was Obama's administration or Trump's administration that ordered them. But the point is, we can't say, you're nuts, $50,000 for drapes. No, we want that money to go to unwed mothers. So with the government, there is no accountability. And what really frustrates me is people like Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey, who have lots of money, who've started their own charity, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oprah Winfrey, of course, the schools in Africa, I don't know how many schools she has, but there they are saying, I think the government should take more of my money. I don't think I'm taxed enough. And I want to ask Bill Gates, well, first of all, shake him by the lapels, or shake him by the polo collar.
Got more dollars than cents, yes.
I don't think I've ever seen him wear lapels, but shake him by the polo collar and say, Bill, if you think the government can do that much better of a job spending money, then
give it all.
Why don't you give all that money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, just turn it over to a federal government program and let them spend the money. And while you're at it, why don't you give Microsoft too if they're so great at running things? It's ridiculous. Of course the government doesn't do a better job. And I need to look up these numbers for currently. When I was in college, I had seen a speaker who said that to get $1 from a person who's giving it to a person in need, it cost, and again, these are like 1970 numbers, it costs something like 10 cents for a church to do it. They've got very low overhead. Something like, I don't know, 35 cents for a private charity to do it. Mm-hmm. But $1.25 for the government. So it actually costs more than the $1 to get the $1 from the person who is giving it to the person in need. Why would you want to do it that way?
Well, it's like there's a lot of other things that go along with that. Look for these wind farms that we're putting in. When you talk about how much money it costs for those, each one of those devices costs in the range of $1 million. We call them, where we put them up, we call them now bird and bat-free zones. Right. Where the environmentalists, and it's like 35 cents a kilowatt hour that they produce, whereas natural gas is like 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour or something along those lines, and much more efficient. And we have, I can't even get my head around this number, but it is said that we have more natural gas in the United States, under the United States, than any place else in the world. It's something like, I think it was somewhere in the range of 30 trillion cubic feet or something of natural gas. We got plenty of it, and it'll last quite a while, and it's quite clean. And we're the only state that's built a nuclear power plant in 40 years. And France is 80% nuclear power.
Yeah, and I've been advocating that we level the playing field. That right now we're spending something like $15 billion a year in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. And that doesn't even include the leases, the below market rate leases for the companies for the land. And a lot of people have, and I need to go read my website about this, because I've had people say, I know, yeah. I know you want to push nuclear power. And I'm like, well, actually, I hope my website doesn't say that, because that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is level the playing field and see what comes out on top. I think what's going to come out on top is nuclear, because it is cheaper, and by the way, much smaller carbon footprint than we're talking about now.
And works all the time. The sun doesn't have to be out. The
Right.
wind doesn't have to be blowing. It works all the time.
Right.
And like we said, France is 80% nuclear power. And I thought we were supposed to do, what France does. So
That's true.
we can-
Yes,
but-
I like the accent. Yeah, and some people get worried about the technology, and I point out that the technology of the older stuff it's a lot safer now. But also the biggest problem was the government went back 40, 50 years ago, said, okay, this is what here's the technology we're going to pick, and they went with it like a monopoly. And imagine if the government came out and looked at Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and IBM and looked at all the offerings and said, okay, Bill Gates, we pick you, everybody else can come home. We wouldn't have seen the innovation in technology
It all evolves.
with that. And I point out that the reason we've got such great smartphones and computers is that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs hated each other.
Mm-hmm.
They went after each other to get the best product for the lowest price out there. And wouldn't that be great if we did that with nuclear power? And that's right now, there is somewhat of a free market. Like Rolls-Royce, the luxury car manufacturer, they've created a nuclear reactor that's like 1/10 the size of the old one, and we've got some other companies too. So if the government can just stay out of it and not say, okay, we picked that one, then we'll continue to see the innovation because people will be working for us.
We had the same thing happen with when
Thank you.
Yes. In our air traffic control system, which doesn't get much business right now, but still, when we start flying again on a regular basis, but the government said, well, we'll save money by not replacing the computers. And I think Chicago O'Hare, which is busy, had these computers that were still running on vacuum tubes. And we don't make vacuum tubes. We were having to buy them from Russia. Those good old Russians that are after us. But you have to go with the innovation. One of the things that we do, sometimes we do a tour of our radio station, we still have our 1945 RCA transmitter in the back. It's
Wow.
about the size, you see those, the 20-foot containers that they have at the port, you see on the trucks, on the 18-wheelers all the time? It's a little bigger than that it took to generate 5,000 watts that we run on.
And I'd like go ahead.
Today, well, I was just going to say, but today, that same the transmitter we have now is about the size of this table, about this high, and probably uses less power in a year than the old one used in a month. And it was all this innovation.
Yep.
Doesn't have the vacuum tubes anymore, so it doesn't need to generate that kind of electricity or to draw that kind of power, so on and so forth. And it's that way with nuclear power. Pretty soon, we will figure out to do nuclear fusion instead of fission, and we will have unlimited power, and there'll be no radioactive residuals.
As long as the government doesn't get in the
Yeah,
way and create
there's
a
that.
monopoly to where people are no longer trying to outdo each other. I love competition.
And by the way, it's Bill Gates' 65th birthday, in case you wanted to send him a card.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he became a senior citizen today.
Maybe I should have been nice to him today.
Well, that's true. You should have. And I was just thinking, if Bill Gates were your uncle, what would you get this guy for a present? The man's worth $70 or $80 billion. What do you do? Hey, Uncle Bill, I got you this. But so you're right, the government gets out of the way, and that's the best thing to do, and that's what the libertarians are all about.
Yep, exactly.
Dr. Jorgensen, how do you see this? When you're out on the campaign trail, what are people talking to you about? What concerns them the most?
What we're hearing from a lot of people is they just seem to have a loss of a sense of control. And it's, every now and then I do get people who say, well, my health care, or I had a heartbreaking story of a woman who was in the service who over the last year has lost 3 friends to suicide, veteran suicides, and had just found out like that day or the day before that another friend of hers had committed suicide. So sometimes we do get specific comments on specific issues, but a lot of times just like people don't feel like they have control over their lives anymore. That, like student debt is out of control. They can't put down money for a down payment. They're delaying having kids, and there's just no sense of being able to drive their lives.
And I think we do a great job in the media of scaring people to death.
Yes.
That there's, when you hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tell people there's only 12 years left, well, let's see, she's been in office almost 2, so there's only 10 years left. And we hear these, you got the smartest 16-year-old in the world, what's her name, Thunberg or whatever, from Sweden or someplace. And she comes along and tells you how dire things are, and how dare you.
Who came over in a boat without power, but neglected to mention she flew back, or her crew flew back or something, yeah.
Oh, how convenient. But we hear of people who say, well, I'm not going to have a child. I'm not going to bring kids into the world. We've only got 10 years left. And that's scary, that people are actually drinking that much Kool-Aid. And it's your job when you're out there on the campaign trail, hopefully, to tell people that that there is a future.
Yeah, well, I still remember reading in the 1970s an article that by the late 90s we wouldn't have any gasoline left in the world. Mm-hmm. And there was going to be a global freeze, right? It wasn't global warming. It was a global freeze.
I was working in Charleston in 1973 when the oil embargo hit, and there were gas lines. You had to make an appointment to go get gas, and then you could only get 10 gallons or something at a time, and then they went to odd days, even days, things of that nature. And we were told there's only about 20 or 30 years of oil left. Yep. And we keep finding more and more all the time. And we call it fossil fuels. There couldn't have been that many dinosaurs. Most geologists today said the Earth manufactures this stuff automatically. And they're going in Texas now, they're finding wells that have been capped for years because they had gone dry that are full again. We keep finding these new oil fields all the time. Saudi Arabia just found a big new oil field. It just seemed to materialize out of nowhere. And there was a big one in Mexico, I think, that they even have a name for it now, oil of Olay. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. Tip the waiters. Try the veal. You didn't have to pay to get in the show, did you? You make a contribution to her. I mean, she's the one that's running.
Blame me.
Dr. Jorgensen, tell people about not only your campaign, but the people that are running with you. Tell us about, give us their background and why they would be so good at their job.
Oh, you mean just in general?
Your vice presidential candidate who was here just recently.
Yep.
And got a good reception.
And unlike that article, I forgot which newspaper it appeared in, that said some lady and a podcaster from his basement, her mother's basement or something. It's like, no, he had a company and he sold it. I don't know how many, people in their late 30s are retired, so speak for yourself. And going around the country, I've seen so many good candidates, such as Harrington out in Arkansas. And I think he's running against Tom Cotton. Is that his name, right? Tom Cotton?
In Arkansas.
And Nick Sarwark got in trouble for coming up with the slogan, "Stop Picking Cotton." I thought it was clever. But that's what he was telling all the people in Arkansas, to stop picking cotton. And Rainwater in Indiana, which is for choice in masks as opposed to a one-size-fits-all. And I'm just hoping that we can get somewhere.
You go back to business. The great thing about the free enterprise system is that some people think that when you hear from the socialist side, they think there's a finite piece of pie, and there's only so many slices. With a free enterprise system, you can bake another pie. You can start another company. You can make your own way, and you did the same thing. You left a company. Were you with IBM? Is that right?
Yep, I worked for IBM for 3 years.
And then you started and became a co-founder of Digitech.
Well, actually, first I went out and I sold software for IBM computers, and then I stayed home to raise my kids for a few years, and then yes, I went out and helped start a disk duplication company we legally copied software.
Well, is that, and of course, you talk about the forward thinking of the government. In 1935 or 36, they tried to close down the patent office
Right.
because they said everything had been
Yep.
invented. So this gives you an idea of the forward thinking of the people who are in office. But as the late great Will Rogers once said, we got the best government money can buy.
Yep.
So this is something that I know that you rail against all the time, is the money that goes to political.
Oh, yeah, because they get their money from special interests, but it's even worse than that because of the ballot access laws.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, for those of you who don't know this, we're the only party other than the Democrats and Republicans in modern history to be on the ballot in all 50 states in back-to-back presidential elections. And it was already tough getting on the ballot before then, but after we did it, then it was even tougher to get on the ballot. So sometimes in one state, we've got to spend tens of thousands of dollars to sue to get on a state or to collect signatures or both. Because this time around, they said, okay, you got to collect whatever, 3,000, 5,000, 20,000 signatures. But oh, coronavirus, nobody can go outside. You can't have more than 10 people together at any one time. Well, how do you collect signatures? And even if you were to collect the signatures, you come in, here are my signatures, it'd be like, okay, you must have been out there with other people more than 10 at a time. Where did you get these? So we had, I think we were successful, and I don't keep up with those numbers, but we were successful, I think 7 out of the 8 states. I mean, at least most of them said yes, that this isn't right. However, that's still a lot of money that could have gone towards advertising, that could have gone towards organization, towards getting the word out. So we've got the Democrats and Republicans who already have more money than they know what to do with. They don't have to spend money to get on the ballot, and yet we do. And by the way, there have been plenty of cases in local races where the Democrat or Republican just forgot to file by a certain date, and oh, he meant to, that's no problem at all. But Kanye West, if he shows up 30 seconds late, or if we show up a minute late,
Yeah, well, and it should disturb, I think, all of us, that, and right across the river here, you know who the left is afraid of. They're spending, the Democrats right now are spending over $120 million on Jamie Harrison's campaign. $120 million or more that is coming for a job that pays $145,000.
I have seen a lot of those ads too, being a
Yeah.
South Carolina resident.
Mm-hmm.
The 5 minutes I'm home here and there between campaign trips, yeah.
And that is one of the most disturbing things. A few years ago, we were wondering why the George Soros organizations were pouring so much money into district attorney races, local district attorney races. We're finding out now, when the Jesse Smollett thing that blew up, when he made some claim that some guy in a MAGA hat, a couple of guys in a MAGA hat in South Chicago at 3 in the morning, right? Started attacking him, and when that story fell apart, the district attorney drops the charges. The people in St. Louis who were defending their house when the thugs broke into their neighborhood, threatened their lives, and threatened to burn down their house and kill their dog, came out to defend themselves using their Second Amendment rights, brandishing their weapons, and save their own lives. They're the ones being prosecuted now. The charges were dropped against the mob with the district attorney that's in office in St. Louis. So
Well, that's good.
you keep asking those questions, and this is a reason that we need to have good grassroots libertarian candidates that are out there trying to tell people what they need, what they really need to hear.
Yeah, and I know you weren't trying to bring this up to bring up the Second Amendment, but I have to just jump in
Please
and
do.
mention, because it's really easy to lie with statistics. In fact, when I was an undergrad, I read a book written in the 50s, great book called How to Lie with Statistics. If I recall right, they never did in St. Louis, they never fired their gun, right?
No.
Okay.
Didn't even point. They said they were pointing it. You actually
Right.
had the gun, if you give
Right,
notice.
right, yeah, because all the news footage I showed, because if anybody, if they had fired, I figured somebody would have gotten it.
Sure.
Well, if you listen to the statistics, you're 7 times more likely to kill somebody in your own home, right? if you have a gun.
Right.
Well, two things. First of all, they often include suicides. Secondly, some of these statistics look at only when the gun is fired. And by the way, I once brandished a gun in my house. Somebody was, he probably would have been harmless. I think he was high on something and trying to get in, and I showed him my gun and he left. But here's the thing. Yes, thanks.
Usually works every time.
And it was a small gun I showed him, not my big one. But anyway, but if you look at the number of times a life is saved when you merely brandish a gun, not when the gun is fired, then they flip around the other way. And you're much more likely to have your life saved by a gun than not. So
And they
you
don't
got to
keep
be really
statistics
careful.
on that.
What?
No statistics are kept on that. Yeah.
Well, John, yeah, actually, John Lott had come out and said it was more like instead of 1 out of 7 or 7 times more likely, it was more like 1 out of 100, but some people, there were disagreements over the numbers, so I'm not sure what they are. But it certainly makes sense that if you brandish the gun, that those statistics, it's hard. How do you tally those up? Because oftentimes I didn't call the police.
Or as Al Capone once said, you can get a lot more with a gun and a smile than you can with just a smile. Nevertheless, but our Second Amendment rights under attack, and that is one of the biggest. We wouldn't have the First Amendment if it weren't for the Second Amendment, and that has protected us. And when we see a particular political party now that is trying to tell us that they will tell us what kind of guns we can have, if we can have any at all, what kind of car to drive, what kind of fuel you can use. We know how well green energy is working out in California with all the brownouts. So,
and the people fleeing the state. So, and in fact, when you were, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We were talking about something else. I forgot now.
what were we talking about, ladies and gentlemen? Guns.
Guns. Oh well, I'll remember it the next time we're here chit-chatting and on the stage.
You were talking about California and how people were leaving it and coming back.
Gosh,
Yeah, you're trying to get a U-Haul in California or New York right now.
Somebody's got a really good memory out there.
Yes.
Oh, well. But go ahead.
I was just wondering, where do you go from here on the?
Oh, I do remember. I'm sorry.
There we go.
I try to play the role of the good candidate. To be honest with you, I'm under the influence of cold medicine. I really never take drugs except bourbon and cold medicine. Tonight, unfortunately, it's cold medicine, not bourbon.
At least, Dr. Jorgensen, you're not saying that you're running for Senate,
Yes.
and you're not calling your opponent George.
Yes, George yeah. What I've been telling people too is, I've been pointing out that the federal government has too much reach. And when people ask me, what about police? Should we defend it? It's like, well, up to the local police departments. What about education? Well, up to the local jurisdiction, whatever they want. It's not up to the federal government. However, one time when I would step in would be the Second Amendment. And just like we saw George Wallace standing on the steps of University of Alabama preventing black students from entering, and the federal government came in and said, no, can't take their constitutional rights away. If Virginia had passed that egregious law, for some of these other states, I would go in and say, we have a constitutional right, you can't take that constitutional right away. So it's that important.
And we call them inalienable rights, which means man cannot take them away. It's a gift from God to defend your life. And you have every right to if you feel it is threatened. And speaking of defunding the police, the shooting in Philadelphia a couple of nights ago, and somebody was saying, the brother of the man who was killed, unfortunately, said, why didn't the police use tasers? Well, because of defunding, those police didn't have tasers anymore. So they've made their own bed and now have to sleep in it. But in
heard that.
all those cases, just about every time, if you had not resisted arrest, you'd probably still be alive. The police don't get up every day and say, gee, I wonder who I can go kill today. They try to prevent lives, and all this training they're supposed to have. They get a lot of training. In fact, when they're not on the job and when they're not physically doing their on duty, they're usually training about something. But you were talking about, I believe one of the things that you wanted to talk about was demilitarizing. You want to demilitarize the police?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say that I would suggest that things have escalated faster because, you know, in the olden days, we had protect and serve, the nice cop cars, community, all the nice words, and the local beat cop knows everybody by name. And now the federal government has come in and handed out tanks and tear gas and, you know, everything else, grenade launchers. And so now the police have more of an us versus them mentality. And I certainly, you know, I don't want to be at war with other countries, certainly don't want to be at war with our own citizens. And so it just escalates so fast. And it's just a shame that it's come to that.
Well, the great thing about America is that in most countries, they're afraid of their police. My son served in Germany in the Army, and he was told in no uncertain terms, there's no question, if you get arrested by the German police, there's no hope for you here. I mean, yeah. they're going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah. And yeah.
We're not afraid of our cops here for the most part. We're not afraid of our military here. And that's the beauty of America, that we have our president as the commander-in-chief. They salute him when he gets off the plane. I don't care if you got 4 stars on you. You salute that guy. And
yeah.
that's the greatness of America.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean we can't, you know, do a step better. First, I want to point out though about
Please.
the tanks. What's really sad is if, you know, as I said, policing is a local issue. If you put on the ballot in Savannah or wherever, Phoenix, Arizona, you know, Libertyville, Illinois, do you want your taxes raised so our police department can buy a tank or a grenade launcher? Probably most people would say, no, I'd rather spend that extra money, you know, going out to dinner or maybe going on a nicer vacation or something. I don't want to give my money towards a tank. But the way the federal government runs, the way they work is they take our money and then they dangle the free tank in front of the police departments. And I mean, how do you expect a police department to say no? Because they're sitting there saying, well, I might as well take the tank. You know, if we don't, then the people in Alabama will get it, and that's our taxpayer dollars. So that's how we end up buying things that we don't want. It goes to the federal government, and then we take stuff that's supposedly free. But yes, we do have, I admit, we do have places where we could improve in our legal system, such as the fact that drugs that people of color use have much longer prison sentences, or the fact that whites and blacks use drugs at about the same rate, and yet there are 6 times as many blacks in prison. So we do have a ways to go, but I would rather be arrested by our police than
anybody else's.
Anywhere else, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that we have, during the Great Depression, we keep hearing about all the time, crime actually decreased. So poverty does not cause crime, as you might be hearing from the left all the time. We taught people that way. We taught people that you didn't have a right to steal just because you were underprivileged or something along those lines. And I would say to the LeBron James crowd and everything else, maybe you ought to do a police ride-along. But tell citizens, don't resist. You can have your day in court. And I would think that most of these police shootings have happened, or any of the police brutality that's been charged, has come from resisting arrest. The situation in Atlanta at that Wendy's a few months back. Everything was going, they were talking to this guy for 45 minutes and everything seemed fine. They said, well, you know, I'm sorry, we're going to have to take you in. And as soon as they tried to put him in handcuffs, he went ballistic.
Well, would you like to know how San Francisco got rid of that problem of people resisting arrest? It's
quit arresting them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
It's
worked well.
It's like $900, $950, something like that. You can shoplift up to $900, and the police won't even come out. And people know that, and so they leave the store with like 758. It's like they count it up, and they know exactly what the law is, and then they just walk up. And so now stores are closing right and left because, they can't police them.
How sad. Well, Dr. Jorgensen, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your efforts. We thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for
And
doing
it's
this.
been a
I
pleasure
appreciate
having
it.
you. Thank you for being such a great audience. Respectful, listening. Hope you learned something today. And once again, we say, mighty oaks and tiny acorns grow. Keep up the great work. One day we'll see a libertarian president. No, I'd like it to be you, the first female president.
I don't
Michael?
Well, the thing is we just have to let her speak.
Yes.
And have these discussions. And thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Dr. Joe. Thank you both. And how about Coach's Corner again? Yes.
Amen.
Absolutely. What a great night. Dr. Joe will be coming out to meet you. If you would like to come side stage here and get your picture taken with her, we've got a little area set up. You do that. And if you want to have your picture taken with Bill, well, that would be in the back of the parking lot.
See you in the morning on the radio.
Or
You get
just
the
tune
better
in
face you
and
get
like
on the
just-
radio, by the way. I'm so old. When I was born, the Dead Sea was only 6. So
I thought it was 4.5. But thank you all, and thank you both. What a great time here, and so glad that Savannah got to have an opportunity like this to see not just 2 weeks ago vice presidential candidate, but a presidential candidate, and the Dr. Jo Jorgensen. Thank you.
not the son.
Not the
What?
son, not the daughter, not the wife, the husband, or whatever else, the actual candidate. So thank you all for coming out. We're at a bar, we're at a restaurant. You're supposed to say tip the bartenders and waitresses, but also you can tip the campaign. It's not too late. Granted, we're still here a week away, but the campaign is still in a place where it's pushing ads and pushing events like this. All of it costs a lot, and it costs a lot to keep up with the Republicrats. Very expensive. They've got a lot of money behind them. What we have is individual support, and it's about the individual with the Party of Liberty, the party of the individual being the Libertarian Party. So thank you all for coming out. Please go online to joe20.com, make your contribution, and of course, help out, volunteer, get out in your neighborhood and let people know that they have an option. Thank you. Okay, real quick, Dr. Joe is going to first do an interview, and after that interview, we'll be doing the selfie side stage. So don't cross the barricade until we're ready for that. It will happen. She just has to talk to the media. Somebody's going to let her speak. So let's take advantage of that opportunity. So thank you all for coming out and enjoy yourselves.